My name is Anna, and this is not just a story. It's a heartbeat I carried through years of silence, mistakes, and hope. I grew up in a quiet riverside town called Riverbend, a place where the mornings smelled of dew and soft wind brushed through the trees. My house stood near the river, and every evening I watched the water flow past, calm, endless, free. I used to wonder if I would ever be like that river, moving, alive, unafraid. But I wasn't. I was a quiet child. Too quiet. My parents believed silence was good. My father was a school teacher, a man of rules and rigid schedules. My mother stayed home, keeping everything spotless, from the dishes to my notebooks. They didn't like laughter or noise. They didn't like surprises. And they didn't like dreams that didn't fit in books. You must study, they would say. No friends, no games, no nonsense. And I obeyed, because that's what I was taught to do. But I remember watching other children run through the streets, their shoes muddy, their laughter loud. And inside me, something small, like a trapped bird, wished it could fly too. When I started school at 6, the world felt too big, too loud. I sat alone at lunch, drawing circles on my notebook while others played. And then one day, a girl named Emma came to me. She had bright eyes and a fearless smile. "Hi," she said. "Do you want to play?" I didn't speak. I just nodded. And she smiled like she had just made the best decision of her life. Emma didn't mind my silence. She spoke enough for both of us. She laughed, told stories, and stayed by my side. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I had a friend. At school, I discovered something that made my heart feel alive. Drawing. Lines and colors became my language. When I drew, I wasn't shy. I wasn't afraid. I was free. But when I told my parents, my father frowned. "Drawing won't feed you," he said. "Focus on what matters." So I drew in secret, on small scraps of paper, late at night when the house was quiet. That's how I learned to keep my dreams hidden. When I turned 16, I joined a small art club after school. I told my parents it was extra homework, but it was the only place where I could breathe. That's where I met him, Leo. He was 17, with brown eyes that looked like autumn leaves and a smile that made everyone around him lighter. "You draw beautifully," he said one day. No one had ever said that to me before. I blushed, my hands trembling around my pencil. And that moment, that small kindness, changed everything. Leo started waiting for me after class. We walked by the river, talked about dreams, about life. He told me I was beautiful, that I was special. And for the first time, I believed I was. I told him, "I want to go to art school someday." He smiled, but said softly, "You don't need school, Anna. You need love. We can build our own world." It sounded romantic then, like something out of the stories I used to read. I was 17, young enough to mistake love for forever. We promised to marry after graduation. My parents were furious. "You're throwing away your future," my father shouted. But I didn't care. I thought Leo would protect me. I thought love was enough. We got married the day after my 18th birthday. It was a small ceremony, just us and a few friends. I remember wearing a white dress that didn't quite fit, but I didn't care. I was happy. We moved to a nearby town called Willow Bay, a place close to the sea. At first, it felt like a dream. Leo worked at a car garage. I stayed home, cooked, cleaned, waited for him to come home. We didn't have much, but we had each other. A year later, I had our first child, a little girl named Ella. She was tiny, soft, with black hair and curious eyes. The moment I held her, I felt something powerful. Love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need words. But after Ella was born, Leo started to change. He started telling me what to wear, how to talk, what to do. Don't dress like that. Grow your hair. Stop looking like a child. I was confused. I thought love meant acceptance. But now it felt like love had rules. Then he started getting angry. He didn't like me seeing friends. He didn't like when I talked to neighbors. You have a family now. Stay home. So I stayed. Day after day, night after night. The house became smaller. The silence became heavier. Sometimes he came home late, smelling of smoke and something I couldn't name. When I asked where he'd been, he snapped. Don't question me. The first time he pushed me, it was during an argument over nothing. I fell against the table, my arm bruised. He apologized later, brought flowers. I'm sorry, Anna. It won't happen again. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But it did happen again. Not every day. Not always with his hands, but sometimes with his words. Cold, sharp words that left invisible scars. One evening, I went to my parents' house with Ella. I told my mother, my voice trembling, "He hit me!" She looked down. My father said, "You are married, Anna. Go back, work it out." That was the day I realized I was truly alone. Leo left for work every morning like nothing happened, and I stayed home, pretending, too. Pretending things were fine, pretending I was happy. Then I found out I was pregnant again. I cried that night, not out of joy, but fear. Still, when my son Luca was born, he brought light into the darkest corners of my world. He had my eyes, my smile. When he laughed, it felt like forgiveness. But Leo didn't come to the hospital. When I got home, he said coldly, "You're back early?" No flowers this time, no smile. Later, I found out the truth. There was another woman. He didn't hide it. He said, "She understands me better." And my heart shattered in a way I didn't know was possible. I wanted to leave, but where would I go? I had 2 children, no money, no support. So I stayed. Until one day, he told me he was joining the Navy. He promised to send money. And then he left. Weeks passed. Sometimes he sent a little, sometimes nothing. I began cleaning houses in town. Whatever I could do. It was hard, but I had no choice. I had to keep my children alive. When my father died, my mother moved away to live with my brother. I was on my own completely. 3 months later, Leo called from the ship. He said, "I found someone else. I'm happier now." I cried until my voice broke. But 3 months after that, he called again. He said, "I made a mistake. Please take me back." And against all reason, I said yes. He came home, but he wasn't the same. Maybe I wasn't either. He still shouted. He still blamed. But I stayed. Because I didn't know how not to. I was 26 when I finally looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes looked older. My face was tired. "Who am I now?" I whispered. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And then one morning, someone knocked on my door. It was Sarah, my neighbor from down the hall. She smiled warmly. Hi, I made some tea. Would you like to come over? I hesitated. Leo didn't like me talking to people. But she looked kind, and something inside me whispered, go. So I did. And that small decision, that cup of tea, changed my life. We sat at her kitchen table. The smell of lemon and tea filled the room. She looked at me and said softly, You look tired. Are you okay? No one had asked me that in years. The words broke me open. I cried, and she didn't judge me. She just held my hand and said, You're not alone. That day, I found something I had forgotten. Kindness. Sarah and I started meeting once a week. We talked about life, about our children, about the things we'd lost and the dreams we still carried. She said, You bake, don't you? Why not sell cakes from home? I laughed. Who would buy my cakes? She smiled. You'll never know until you try. That night, after the kids slept, I baked. The smell of chocolate filled the room. Ella woke up and wandered into the kitchen. It smells so good, Mama, she said, eyes wide. I smiled. Want to help me decorate? She nodded, her tiny fingers sprinkling sugar like magic dust. The next morning, Sarah took a photo of the cake and posted it in a local group. By evening, I got a message. Can I order one for my son's birthday? My hands trembled as I typed back, Yes. When the woman came to pick it up, she smiled and said, It's beautiful. Thank you. That was the first time in years someone thanked me for something I created. Not cleaned, not cooked, created. That night, I didn't cry. I smiled. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains and painted the kitchen gold. Ella sat at the table, swinging her legs, eating toast, while little Luca giggled on the floor with his toy cars. And for the first time in years, I felt something gentle inside me. Hope. I began baking more. 1 cake a week became 2, then 3. Sarah helped me spread the word. People in Willow Bay began to know my name, Anna, the woman who makes cakes that taste like love. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every time I earned a few coins, I saved them in a small jar hidden behind the flour tin. That little jar became my secret symbol of strength. Then one evening, Leo came home early. He saw me decorating a birthday cake, my hands steady, my heart full. His eyes narrowed. What are you doing? He asked. I'm working. I sell these cakes now. He frowned. You don't need to work. I provide for this family. I looked up, meeting his eyes. My voice was soft but firm. I need this, Leo. For me. For the kids. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned away without a word. For 2 days, he barely spoke to me. But this time, I didn't break. I didn't apologize. Something inside me had shifted. For years, I had lived in fear of his anger, of his silence. But now I was beginning to fear something even more. Losing myself again. So, I set new rules, small ones at first. I told him, You can't shout at me in front of the children anymore. And when he laughed, I said quietly, If you hit me again, I'll leave. This time, I meant it. He looked at me, surprised, maybe even confused. He didn't believe me, but I believed me. And that made all the difference. I started dressing the way I liked again. I cut my hair short, the way I'd always wanted. I wore a red shirt that made me feel alive. When Leo saw me, he frowned. You look strange, he said. Before, those words would have crushed me. But that day, I smiled and said, Maybe. but I look like myself again. That evening, Ella tugged my sleeve and said, "Mama, you look happy." And for the first time in years, I truly was. Sarah introduced me to some of her friends, women from the neighborhood, mothers, dreamers, survivors like me. At first, I was nervous, quiet as always, but they were kind. They didn't judge me. One of them said, "You are so strong, Anna." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't the sad kind. They were the kind that wash away old pain. I kept baking. Birthday cakes, cupcakes, wedding cakes. Some weeks were slow, others busy. But every cake carried a little piece of my heart. I named my small venture Anna's Sweet Table. I wrote the name in pink and blue on small boxes. When I packed an order, I felt proud, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. Still, life wasn't suddenly easy. There were bills, long nights, sick children, and moments of fear. Leo still had his moods. He was quieter now, less cruel, but distant. Sometimes he helped with the kids, sometimes he didn't. One night, after a long day, I sat by the window staring at the moonlit river. The same river I'd known all my life, in Riverbend and now here in Willow Bay. Always moving, always flowing. And I thought, maybe I am like that river after all. The next morning, I found an old sketchbook while cleaning a drawer. Its pages were yellowed, filled with pencil drawings. Birds, faces, trees, dreams. I traced one of the lines with my fingertip and smiled. I picked up a pencil and began to draw again. That night, Ella sat beside me drawing flowers. Luca scribbled with crayons, his laughter echoing in the small room. And in that moment, surrounded by colors and laughter, I felt peace. Leo still lived with us. He wasn't the man I once loved, but he wasn't the monster I once feared either. Maybe time had softened him. Or maybe he just realized I was no longer afraid. One night, I sat beside him after putting the children to bed. He was watching TV, silent as always. "Leo," I said gently, "we need to talk." He looked at me, startled. "I don't want to fight. I just want peace. If you want to stay, things must change. You can't hurt me anymore. Not with your words, not with your silence. You have to respect me." He stared at me for a long moment, then said, quietly, "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I had to. I was tired of being small." He didn't apologize, but he didn't shout either. And somehow that silence felt like a beginning, not an end. That night, I wrote a list in my notebook. At the top, I wrote, "My dreams." 1. Open my own cake shop. 2. Save for Ella and Luca's education. 3. Go back to art class someday. 4. Feel happy and free. It was a small list, but it was mine. My first roadmap to a life that belonged to me. Weeks passed. I learned about money, customers, and courage. Sarah showed me a flyer from the library. "Free small business classes," she said. "You should go." "I don't know anything about business," I laughed. She smiled. "You know how to bake. That's enough to start." So, every Thursday, I went to the library. I learned how to price my cakes, how to plan savings, how to tell my story online. I met women like me, tired, brave, determined. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Anna's sweet table started to grow. I sold more cakes, got repeat customers, even did a wedding order once. Each time someone said thank you, it felt like a piece of my broken self stitched together. One afternoon, Sarah came over with flowers from her garden. "You look happy these days," she said. I smiled. "I'm trying. Some days are hard, but I feel more like myself now." She nodded. "You're doing amazing, Anna. And remember, you are never alone." That evening, as I washed the dishes, I looked at the small jar of coins on the shelf. It was fuller now. I had started saving not just money, but pieces of my own courage. Later that night, I stood on the balcony looking at the moonlit river. Ella came out and leaned on my shoulder. "Mama, do you think dreams come true?" I smiled. "Yes, my love. But sometimes they take time, and sometimes they come in a different way than we imagined." She smiled softly. "I hope your dream comes true, Mama." "I hope yours does too," I whispered back. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. "Dear Anna, you were scared, you were tired, but you didn't give up. You found light in the darkness and courage in small steps. Keep going. One day, you will be free." I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer. It was a promise to myself, from myself. Months later, I rented a small corner at a local market. Just a table, a few cakes, and a hand-painted sign. Anna's Sweet Table. People smiled when they passed. Some stopped to buy. Some just said, "Your cakes smell wonderful." And every word, every smile, became a little piece of healing. Leo still came home late sometimes, still carried his own silence, but he didn't yell anymore. He watched me sometimes, maybe confused, maybe proud. I didn't ask. I didn't need to, because my happiness no longer depended on him. One Sunday morning, Ella hugged me tightly before school and said, "Mama, when I grow up, I want to be like you. You make people happy with your cakes. You are strong." Her words filled my heart like sunlight. I kissed her forehead and said, "You can be anything you want, my love." After she left, I sat with Luca and played cars on the floor. His laughter filled the house, bouncing off the walls that once heard only shouting. Now they echoed with joy. Later, I baked 3 cakes, one for a birthday, one for an anniversary, and one just for us. The smell of vanilla and chocolate mixed with the sound of Ella singing in the background. It was a small life, but it was beautiful. As I stood by the window, watching the afternoon light fall on the river, I whispered to myself, "You are the reason I keep going." That night, after the children slept, I sat with my notebook again. I opened to the page where I had written my dreams, and I smiled because some of them were already coming true. Maybe I didn't have a big shop yet. Maybe I still had days when I felt lonely or afraid. But I was no longer the girl who whispered instead of speaking. I had become the woman who stands up, who works, who dreams again. And that was enough. If you're listening to my story, I want you to remember something. You are stronger than you think. You can survive heartbreak. You can rise again, slowly, gently, beautifully. Even when everything feels dark, there's always a small light waiting inside you. Hold on to it. Nurture it. Because one day, it will grow into something powerful. Like hope, like peace, like love. You are not alone. You are never alone.